Hey guys, so it's the start of the month and we just had YCS Indianapolis, so as usual I wanted to provide a tier list of the best meta in rogue decks using YCS and regional level topping information as well as some Dueling Book data as well. And before we continue, definitely go check out those discount codes for Yu-Gi-Oh! Sleeves as well as singles. Of course, we do still have those Rarity Collection 2 singles out, and you can use code HAKUNA5 at both Tier 0 games as well as Card Brawler, so go check those out. And of course, we can't do this video without giving shout out to both Ivan as well as YGOProduct.com for really keeping track of all of the topping level information. Anyways, let's just start with the tier list for this month. Really, no surprise by a huge margin. Snake Eye is number one. We just saw YCS Indianapolis. They just took up essentially 2/3 of all the top cut, which is a little bit disappointing to see considering that we just had a ban list, at like the end of April. And so clearly it didn't really do too much. Now, one thing that was a little interesting was that I recently provided a regional report of some of the regional level tops in the last few weeks leading up to YCS Indy. And in that report, I saw that, Kashira, Snake Eye made up about 1/3 of all Snake Eye tops. But you know what, in YCS Indy, really, I think only like one of them was Kashira version, and really everything else was just pure. I did kind of note how the trend for pure was increasing over the last few weeks, but really kind of caught me off guard in terms of how much the pure version dominated. And then in terms of Tenpai Dragons, of course, YCS level wise, Indianapolis, it was a bit of a disappointing showing. Regional level wise, though, they have been doing incredibly well at second place and have been doing really well as the time went on. But of course, just didn't do too well this time around. They will just get better, of course, post Infinite Forbidden. But right now, it's definitely kind of a high rolly deck, in terms of what kind of non-engine you end up drawing and being able to OTK really easily if you are able to actually break the board through non-engine first. You also have Voiceless Voice. This was actually very close with this and Melodious. I think Voiceless Voice, though, in terms of regional level tops as well, has been very consistently good and pretty deserving of this third place. Definitely didn't have the best showing as well this YCS, though, compared to the last one. But you know what? It's a deck that can just constantly get up, negate up, has some access to pops as well as, with the new support from Legacy Destruction, having some better recursion as well. So I think it is still a pretty solid choice. There are different variations, whether it's pure, whether it's with branded, or whether with even Melodious stuff. And speaking of Melodious, they are also now made it to tier 1, and because they actually had 2 YCS level tops at Indianapolis, so that was pretty impressive. Definitely been seeing a lot of DB Grinder replay videos for this one. It's pretty cool in terms of the kind of interactions it puts up, like the non-targeting bounces. They have like a triple DD Crow essentially. They have a pretty sticky end board as well that continues to kind of recur itself. And of course, you can definitely go check out that video I did where I surveyed Melodious players so that you have a better sense in terms of, what cards are good to side against this strategy. So moving on to tier 2, we do have Runic Stun, unfortunately, and in terms of stun decks in general, for the most part they are Runic versions, especially the 2 that did top the YCS Indianapolis. Those were Runic variants. At the regional level, sometimes you see like the quote-unquote pure stun with, Apache as well as like Dogmatica cards, but that one is not as common. And unfortunately, Runic Stun, as long as these floodgates, especially something like Skill Drain, which is very popular in all stun decks, as long as floodgates like that exist, I think this deck, type of deck is going to stick around, and it is just kind of like a cheaper option to just hang in the meta. And then you have like the Fire King variant of Snake Eye. So this has taken a step back in terms of representation, YCS level and regional level, which I did make a comment in the regional report video I did recently as well. It's sort of like reminiscent of when Phantom Nightmare format first started. Everyone kind of started with like the Fire King version, and then eventually they sort of leaned towards playing pure. And I guess we're kind of seeing that right now as well. At the same time, I think the Fire King version definitely has some uniqueness to it as well. I've been seeing a lot of the DB Grinder replays, and kind of cool seeing them out certain floodgates through at least having access to like Runics popping Kyrian. So while you do have to play some more bricks, at least there are some unique strengths to it as well. And then you have branded Despia, just like very solid tier 2 all around for the last little while, and it's just kind of hung in that kind of top 5, top 7 place for the last half a year or so at least. So Gimmick Purple Lock is still quite strong. I'm sure that will get banned eventually. And speaking of ban, I'm actually not sure if they would do a ban list before NAWCQ. Leading up to YCS India, I thought there would be no chance, but considering the top cut results from that event, I mean, maybe it's possible. And at that point, Gimmick would probably go away. But at the same time, branded Despia, for example, a deck like this will also have some indirect support in Infinite Forbidden because that new Light and Darkness Dragon, that is something that this deck can make as well. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting in the next format too. And then you have Labrynth is another one, kind of similar to like Brandon Despia and Kesha. Like those 3 I feel like are very solid tier 2 contenders for the last little while. This also topped YCS Indy. It also being able to tutor out D-Barrier is kind of nice in a format where, D-Barrier is actually very strong, where against Voiceless Voice, Ritual, against Tenpai, Synchro, against Branded and Melodious Fusion, I think there are a lot of applications right now. Then you have Kashira, pure Kashira, so it actually has been a little bit falling back at the regional level event that I made a comment on in the regional report. It did still manage to top the YCS though, so definitely cannot underestimate them. Kashira as an engine though, of course, has been quite popular, especially in Snake Eye. As I mentioned earlier, about a third of the regional level topping Snake Eye variants have been Kashira versions up until then, which of course is a very small package. It's really just like Unicorn and Birth, giving you extra bodies. But you know what, some other decks have also been utilizing Kashira as an engine as well. So you know what, as long as Unicorn, Fenrir, they were like at 3, I think it's going to see a lot of play. So next we have Salamangreat, and this being in tier 2 isn't necessarily a surprise. This was actually in edge of tier 2 when I did it a couple months ago as well, like before we had the ban list. And so while it did kind of initially struggle a little bit in terms of regional level tops when Legacy Destruction format started, in the most recent week it actually has done pretty decently well. I think I also mentioned that in the regional report, and it also topped the YCS, which I believe was an FTK version, so maybe it's not like the conventional way. But you know what, Salad got a lot of indirect support through something like Promethean Princess, going to be really good in this deck. Of course, you know, Raging Phoenix is actually utilized to its full potential in this deck as well, and even with the new support that we had gotten last year, they are able to play through Nibiru a little bit better, and you can certainly go check out a recent Salamangreat profile on my channel as well. Moving on to Rogue, we do have Yubel. At the very least, at least it's a top Rogue now. I think maybe some would say it's been a bit disappointing in terms of its performance so far post Legacy Destruction, but at the same time, it's not at full power yet. Of course, there's still missing that fusion, which I think it looks like based on the description for Battles of Legend set, I feel like it will probably come in that one. You know what? I think it's still pretty unique. YCS level wise, unfortunately, has not topped yet. But at the very least, local level wise, I feel like you're probably going to see this deck a lot. I think it's still pretty unique in terms of like just essentially getting beaten down by 0 attack monsters, being forced to battle. And I think being in kind of like an anime deck, I do think that it's really cool to see a strategy like this be meta. Then we have Centur-Ion. This is something that actually at the regional level in the last couple of weeks have been actually doing quite well, and it's even seen play as kind of a package in certain other decks. Like for example, there was a Lightsworn deck that topped with a Centur-Ion package that was on my channel. You can check that out. Basically kind of like these, even Mannadium too, like just these synchro strategies, I guess, using Centur-Ion stuff to essentially Calamity Lock, which is very strong. And you know what, when you're in a meta against something like Snake Eye where they just have infinite gas, or let's say with like Tenpai Dragons where they can just deal so much damage through a lot of different interactions, just being able to prevent them from playing at all, such as like the Gimmick Lock, Calamity Lock, kind of is a very key strength to have. So next we have Flunder, which I think has actually been struggling a little bit. Even at the regional level, hasn't had that many tops either post Legacy Destruction, and certainly did not top the YCS either. So yeah, sure, Dimension Shifter is definitely very strong, but perhaps it's not enough, at least not right now, especially when you have something like Tenpai Dragons also being able to play Shifter. And then you have, speaking of Shifter, you have Tearlaments, which of course, hey, maybe if Shifter finally gets banned, Tearlaments would see a little bit more play again. Didn't top the YCS, does have a few regional level tops and national level tops though, a couple of them being the Paleozoic variant as well, of course, popularized by Top Tier Gaming YGO, which you should check out. I think there's still always potential for this deck to kind of come back really, especially with Shifter being gone. Then you have Chimera, whether it's branded or Melodious, has been a pretty solid rogue option as well. I think with also the new illusion support that came in Legacy Destruction, this deck actually gets beefed up as well. The one that's like anti-spell fragments on legs, it actually is kind of unique and kind of sets up a unique interaction where, you know, like, are you going to bait first in terms of whatever you set first, and because they are able to pop it as well. So I think, and not to mention they were already hand ripped you for one, so I think it's actually pretty formidable to go against still. Next we have Pearly, which honestly in the last few weeks has actually been pretty disappointing in terms of even regional level performance. YCS level wise, it has not topped either in the most recent one. I mean, you know what, they did get Delicious Memory to 2, which means you have easier access to something like X Pearly Noir, but I suppose that's maybe not enough right now in this current format. So next we have Rika, Sun Avalon, Aromage plus Reka cards, I suppose. So I believe a lot of them, or maybe all of them that are topping are like these like 60 card pile lists. So pretty interesting shift towards that. And so regional level wise, in the most recent week, it actually did get a decent amount of tops, and I was actually kind of hoping maybe it would sneak in there in terms of YCS level tops. So I still have confidence maybe that can still happen, maybe at like the NAWCQ and potentially most likely at the European WCQ as well. So definitely keep an eye out on this one. And then you also have Mannadium. This one definitely fell off really hard at the beginning of Legacy Destruction format. but also in the most recent week, similar to something like Rika, actually has had a number of tops as well. Unfortunately, it did not convert to a YCS level, but at the same time, you know what, even with like Barone being banned, but I guess, I mean, Droll is probably not seeing as much main deck play still. It didn't after the YCS Rio. I will do a YCS Half Cup breakdown for the most recent event, and so we'll take a look in terms of, you know, how often Droll is played. But you know what, whenever it kind of falls out of at least main deck play, you know, you're going to probably see Mannadium see a bit of rise, although Nibiru is still probably pretty popular, which is, I can only assume, kind of strong against them when they don't have Barone anymore. And then finally, we have Pure Unchained. Of course, Unchained as an engine has actually been pretty popular with like Yubel, even Labrynth as well. So, but Pure-wise, it's actually still getting a decent amount of regional level tops so far. Maybe not as many as we saw at the beginning of Legacy Destruction format, but you know what, definitely something to not count out on. And then finally, we do have Spright, which perhaps is a little bit weird to see in a tier below Rogue compared to what we're used to in terms of regional level tops as well. Did not top the YCS this time around, but you know, there's different kinds of Spright variants, you know, whether it's like with pure, quote unquote, with like the Melfi stuff. Usually you see it with like Runic, along with like Furhire, or maybe even the live twin version, which actually did top, by the way, in the most recent couple weeks. But right now, it hasn't been too strong, unfortunately. Alright guys, so that was it for the meta tier list post YCS Indianapolis for this month. I know we're a little bit bored with Snake Eye already because they've just been dominating for quite some time now, but you know what, we do have Infinite Forbidden coming next month, just before NAWCQ starts, so at least that'll bring some excitement, and who knows, maybe we'll also get a ban list too to make it a little bit more chaotic. But anyways, huge thanks to all of you for watching. Big thanks to my Patreons and sponsors as always for the continued support, and well, take care guys.